Okay, everybody, we're going to learn to draw. And the first step in learning to draw is learning to see the shapes that the image is comprised of. So we're going to break down this little character into his most basic shapes. I chose him because it's pretty obvious what kinds of shapes the artist used to make him. We see a circle for the head or an oval, triangles for these spikes, a rectangle for his body, inverted triangles for his legs, okay, and then these little rectangular and triangular arms and hands. Okay, and then the rock is a series of ovals. So if we can see those shapes, then we can draw each shape to recreate this artwork. So the first thing I did is I printed this out. You do not need to print this out if you can't. However, if you can print it out and follow these steps, it will help. We're going to draw this step by step together. So if you don't have the printout, it's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie and trace this oval. And you'll notice it's not a perfect oval or a perfect circle. Rarely can we draw a perfect circle. Then I'm going to trace the triangles. You can see I closed this one here just to note that it's in front of his head, not behind. And this one here too. Okay. And this one. And this one. And our goal is to draw this as accurately as possible. Of course, it's not going to be 100% like the artists, but we want to get as close as possible. Getting these little spikes. And then for the hands, I'm going to trace the outside, and then I'll put the fingers in later. So I'm kind of turning the hands into these more complicated organic shapes. They look kind of like little frog hands. Okay, come down to the legs. And then I'm going to divide this into a series of ovals, or what looks like tires stacked together. All right, now I see all my shapes that I'm going to draw. I'm going to move this guy over a little bit, and I'm going to put a piece of paper next to him. Okay, now if you have a paper side by side, it's really easy to kind of find the height of a shape because you can draw lines over from one side to the other. This is like a little cheat, but if you don't have the paper, you're going to have to kind of eyeball it as you're drawing off the image on your computer. So I'm going to draw these lines over. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to do, oh, one more thing. I'm going to just divide his head in half through his nose, that's the center line, and then through his eyes for the eye line, and then mouth line. And you can see that the nose comes right below the eye line. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to draw that center line, and around it I'm going to draw this oval shape. Okay, and it's going to be about half and half. It's symmetrical, so these sides are going to be the same. Okay, and I'm looking at the shape and I'm refining it as I go, but you can see I'm leaving a lot of lines on the page because I'm just loosely kind of figuring out that shape, and I'm looking at the tilt. Okay, and then I might come in, I'll put in these lines as well. You can see this is halfway between and then halfway again. Okay, so I'm gonna move this over just a little so you can see. And you'll want to pause here and get these steps in. Don't forget to pause the video as you're drawing. All right, next I'm going to look from the center line over. I'm going to measure with my eyes about how far this triangle starts. And I'm looking at the shape of it and about the height of it. Okay. You can always use your fingers to kind of measure. Are they the same height if you have your picture? Okay. Then this triangle starts, if I put in the eye here, this next triangle starts just above it, and it's not quite as tall I want to see the distance between these. So I'm looking at the negative space there. What is the shape between the shapes? And it looks like this one comes to about here. So if I'm looking at what's the distance between the spikes. And then the next one seems to come like so. Again, I'm looking at the distance between the spikes. Okay. So next, let's move over to this side. I'm going to see the distance between those spikes. I'm eyeballing. What is that? So this comes to right on this line really and comes down. And again, it's not as tall as this one. And it looks like I made this too tilted. So I'm going to adjust that. And see how my space here is a little bit off? It looks like maybe this one's tilted too. So I'm starting to see my errors as I fill them in. Okay, so if you're noticing some differences in your work, you'll want to adjust. So I'm just straightening this one out just a little bit. And small errors, you know, they don't show up in the final drawing. No one's going to be exactly measuring, but you want to get as close as possible. So now I have these spikes adjusted. I'm going to put in the next one and look, they're about the same height. So again, I'm looking at this negative space. And as I'm drawing, make sure you pause and draw with me. Okay, and then this one comes right off that corner, so I can put in the eye here. And this one's much shorter, a little wider. Okay, and then we have this spike here, not quite as long as that one. And again, off this little smile line, we have this one here. And you can see I added in the eyes as I was drawing the spikes so I could check the distance between the spikes and the eyes. Now I can come in, add in that nose, add in that smile, and I can move down to the body. So again, pause, check your work. Now I'm really looking at the length of the body. The body, if I compare, the body is about the same length as the head. The head might be just a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down and I'm going to make a little line here. So if I move this center line down, they're about the same size. And then I'm going to draw that square around that center line. And if I look here, the body meets halfway between the nose and the eyes. So I know it's not too wide. So again, it's about as long as the head, and it's about as wide from the nose halfway between the eyes. Okay, so I'm not only looking at what are the shapes of the things, but how do these shapes fit together? And I'm looking for clues, right? Because you can see I've drawn mine bigger than this one. However, I'm keeping the proportions accurate. So it doesn't matter if it's bigger or smaller. Please don't draw too small. If you're drawing really, really, really tiny, go ahead and make it bigger. It should never, you can draw larger than this picture, but please do not draw smaller. Now I'm going to compare the legs. The legs are about as long as the body, a little bit longer. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to just elongate it just slightly longer. And look at the curve of those legs. They're a slightly curved triangle. And then I'm going to look, this leg comes down a little longer than the other one. It's kind of standing behind that rock, like so. Okay, now I can do a couple of things. I could draw the rock, or I could go back up and do the hands and the feet. I'm going to, just because I'm here, I'm going to do the rock. I'm going to look at that curve between the legs. I'm going to draw that. And I'm going to come down and make that little dome shape. And then I'm going to look at this one's much thinner. So I'm going to kind of find that thinness. I'm going to draw that. And again, eyeballing, but it's again about the same width, a little thinner here. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to come back up. I'm going to add in the spikes. If I look at the spike, it comes not quite to the edge. So I'm going to put it right in here. And then it has this other one that comes down. And then about midway through the body right here, we have another spike. And this one's much smaller. And these are kind of like little twin spikes up here. Now, if we look, the arms are coming about halfway, well, it's above halfway, so right under the spikes. And they come down to about the knees. So I know my arms are going to hit this line. If I draw, one's going to be slightly above the knees. So I'm going to come down, and I'm going to look at where the hands start, right at the legs here. Okay. And I'm going to double this, and then I'm drawing this shape here. And I think I've drawn the hands a little bit bigger than the artist normally had. And so I'm making note of the differences. Okay, I'm going to have to bring this one up. And the hand here starts up here. See, I think I started this one a little bit too low. I'm just going to bring this one up. Move this over so you can see a little bit better. And this one starts above the body or above the legs, and it doesn't quite go down as far. I'm looking at what angle these lines travel at and drawing these shapes. Okay, so now I have all my shapes in except for my hands. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the original image, one where I haven't drawn all over. And I'm going to check what I've forgotten. Well, first I forgot this little spike in here, which I don't love for the character. That's why I kind of left it out, but we'll add it back in. And now I'm going to come in and start cleaning up my work and refining it. So I can go ahead, I'm going to work top down. I'm going to erase lines as I go and adjust my shapes. So I'm noticing the head here is a little bit more round. So I'm going to adjust it here, bringing that in so it's a little bit more round. And so I didn't do a lot of erasing before because I knew I was going to come in and fix the shapes as I go. And then I'm going to look at which spikes are growing out of the head at the front and which ones are coming from behind. And I'm going to look at the kind of the curves of these spikes. Did I get them right? Are they too spiky? So I'm going back in and adding that artistic hand. See how the hand kind of wobbles here? The spikes are not perfect. You're not going to get the exact wobble that the artist got. You have a different hand, but I'm just going to make these feel a little more hand-drawn and clean up the lines. This one comes way down like so, and it's a little more rounded. Okay. And this one wasn't quite as wide as I had here. So I'm coming in, I'm going to narrow that one and then put that curve of the head there. Okay. And again, we want to be as accurate as possible, knowing that our hand is different than the original artist. Making sure the eyes are the right shape and size. Putting in the nostrils here. Adjusting the curve of the mouth. I'm just coming in and doing small revisions and refinements. This looks like it's pointed up too high, so I'm just going to straighten out that line. Okay. And then I'm going to come down here, and I notice it's a little thinner here. So I'm going into these kind of geometric shapes that I drew, and I'm making them a little more organic. And then this line comes right down into the leg here. And comes over here, looking at that tilt of that line. And up here. It's a little rounded here. Okay. These are a little thinner. But again, I drew my character a little bigger, so don't want to make them too thin. And I'm going to check these spikes, refining those shapes. And now I'm coming into this hand and I'm seeing what I need to add in finger-wise. So you can see I have that. And then this finger is behind here, so I'm going to go in like that. Okay. And I'm really noticing I drew my hands a bit larger than I should have. And this is when artistic decision making really needs to come into play. Should I make those smaller? I'm looking here, I'm looking here. I can make them just a tad smaller. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to retrace it, but just making it slightly smaller. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm coming down. Okay. And again, I'm looking at what is the space between here. I'm getting those hands in. And then I'm going to clean up. I have the spike here. Okay, adding that in. And then I'm noticing this spike here is growing out, so I'm getting rid of that line. This one is there. And this one grows out of his body, this one's behind. Okay. And he's got on like a little striped shirt, so I'm going to add in those stripes for later when we color it in. And now I'm going to just refine the rock. So I'm going to go around the outside edge of this rock and get in those bumps. And I'm going to erase some of this line. I'm going to leave a little bit of the line just for when we go in and add the color. So there's a little bit of line here, but it doesn't connect all the way. And then I see this ink right here needs some refinement. Okay, and so forth. And this still isn't looking great here. So I'm moving back and forth, checking my work, looking, comparing what's slightly off. What can I do to make it more accurate after I've drawn my shapes? How can I change them? That seems to help right there. All right, so once you have drawn all your shapes and then gone back and cleaned them up, revised and refined them, I want you to pause here. Go ahead and erase any extra lines that are still showing. Okay. And you have drawn your first character by breaking down what you see into shapes, drawing, revising, and refining. The next steps, which we will do together, is to would be to add color and marker, but for this we're really focusing on the drawing, so do not feel the need to go in and trace it with marker or add color. We don't have to do that. Okay, but remember to keep looking, revising, and refining the work until it feels as accurate as possible. When you are done, go ahead and upload your character to Google Classroom. I can't wait to see how you do.